Hey, this is Jamey Stonemaier with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to explain how to teach Tapestry. And just to be clear, this is not how to play Tapestry. You can look at other videos like the Watch It Play video for that. This is how I teach it whenever I teach Tapestry. And really, this is how I get players to start playing Tapestry. I'm not going to explain the entire process here. Basically, I sit down with players and I do the setup with them for the most part. And the setup with Tapestry mostly involves one of these income mats and putting buildings, covering up most of the spaces on these income mats. So I go through that process. There's some things you put on the board. There's the board here. You randomly give players a capital city, and you randomly give players a civilization. And this is actually the first choice that they make if they have, because you'll give them 2 civilizations and they'll make a choice. And generally, I don't recommend that they know all the rules at this point. Rather, I say pick one that looks interesting and fun to you. And sometimes they might look to me for guidance as to which one is a little simpler. So if you already know how to play Tapestry and you know that one of the 2 civilizations they have is a little simpler, you can just point that out to them, so they can choose that one if they want to for their first play. Then in Tapestry, the first turn of the game is an income turn. I tell players we're going to be taking 5 of these turns throughout the game, and this is how the length of the game will be determined. We'll take 5 income turns, but we'll take them at different times throughout the game whenever you're ready, except for the first one, which we're all going to do together. And I'll walk through how to do the income turn, and that's over here on this side. And I'll tell them, okay, I'll explain these little numbers which show which of these things you're going to do during each of the income turns. And as you can see, if you look really close there, the number 1, the first income turn, doesn't appear except for this last slot. So despite that, I'll go through and I'll say, okay, in most income turns, most players will be activating a civilization ability. In most income turns, we're going to be playing a tapestry card somewhere on this income mat in the leftmost slot. In most income turns, we're going to be upgrading a tech card and gaining victory points from all exposed victory point icons up here. That's all I'll say. I won't go any deeper than that. And then finally, I'll say, okay, and finally, we're going to collect income. And again, we're going to look at exposed icons up here on the income mat. And we're all going to do this in the first round. And all players will end up doing the same thing because no one's done anything else yet. And you'll slide over the little resource markers to the 1 slot because that's how the setup will be. You'll each get 1 resource. Each player will get a territory tile, a random territory tile. I'll tell players flip that face up. That'll remain face up throughout the game. And all players also receive a random tapestry card. I'll tell players to put that face down. And usually I'll remind them, or I'll say that tapestry cards are mostly actually not secret, but there are a few that are secret, and so you need to keep those face down throughout the game. So I've walked through the income turn. That's a big part of the game. I've kind of walked through that. Whenever a player takes their first full income turn, one where they're doing civ abilities and playing tapestry cards, I will then explain in a little bit more detail how to do that. But it's also explained as summarized on their reference card. The reference card shows on the other side the core abilities, the core benefits that players will be taking on the tracks on the board. And this is the second part of the explanation. I'll be telling players many of the turns that you'll take during the game are advanced turns. And this is after we've done the income turns. And so the first player will take an advanced turn. And at this point in the game, again, I won't try to explain everything. There are a lot of icons on these tracks, but I'll point out that on any advanced turn, you are just choosing one of your tokens. Like on this military track, every player will have a token here. I'll say you're choosing one of these tracks, and you are paying the cost of where you're advancing to. You're advancing only 1 space, so the first cost here is any 1 resource. You're paying that cost, and then you're advancing your token into that slot, and you're gaining the benefit, and then if there's a bonus, you can pay to gain that bonus. I'll explain that core element. That's what you're mainly doing. That's what you're doing on advanced turns. You're paying the cost. You're moving your token 1 space forward. Doesn't matter if there are any other tokens there. Multiple tokens can be on the same space, and then you're gaining the benefit and maybe paying to gain the bonus if there is one there. And at that point, I will just tell players do something on one of these tracks, and I will guide you through what that means. Again, the core actions are referenced on their reference card, but I find it very easy to just explain them. Like the first action for military is the conquer action. That's the core action for the military track. The core action for the tech track is to just gain a tech card. So I'll encourage players to do different tracks for their first few advanced turns so that I can show them what those core abilities are. And after that, players just play. They just take turns. And as they reach actions that they need answers for, I explain it. Or I point out that there are 2 reference guides that players can look at so they can see the next action. And I really try to emphasize here that players don't need to look too far ahead on the tracks. I just say that the actions get better, they get different, they get more powerful late on the tracks. But really on your turn, you're just looking at the 4 available benefits that you can get, because there are only 4 tracks. You can only advance 1 space forward. You really only need to think 1 step forward, especially for your first game, for a learning game of Tapestry. There's one other element that you have to teach at a certain point, and that's when players start to construct buildings. Whether they are landmarks they're gained from these tracks or from tech cards. Landmarks are these big, colorful buildings that you'll get to place in your capital city. And there are also income buildings that look like these that players are gaining as well. And so when players start to gain them, they show up as benefits on these tracks. That's when I explain how the capital city works, which is basically just that you can't place buildings on the red spots. Those are impassable territories. You are trying to fill up these districts, these 3x3 grids. Red dots count as already filled in. And when you do that, whenever you fill in one in, you instantly get 1 resource. And that is also good to complete rows and columns, because that's how you score your capital city throughout the game during the income phase or income turns. For every complete row or column, you get a victory point. And that's it. There are other rules to explain, but I explain them as I get to them. The things that I just told you right there are all players really need to know to start the game. And really, I've walked you through the first couple turns here, so that's even more more than just starting the game. That's the first few turns of the game. That's how I teach Tapestry. If you have different methods, I'd love to hear your methods in the comments. I know this hasn't been a particularly visual explanation, but hopefully you get the gist of it. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have in the comments as well. Thanks.